Contained, that's what they called it, like it was some kind of compliment, like my stillness meant safety, not calculation. They saw the quiet, the patience, the deliberate pause between movements, and thought it was restraint. It wasn't. It was a lock on a door they couldn't even see. They never realized the lock wasn't for me, it was for them. Every smirk they threw, every shove they thought I'd absorb, every time they leaned in to test the line, they were stacking the weight against their own ribs. I didn't have to push back, I just had to wait. And I waited well. They think danger comes with warning signs, raised voices, sudden moves, sharp words. That's the easy kind to see coming, the kind that bleeds into the air and gives you a chance to run. Mine doesn't. Mine sits in the room, steady, unblinking, until it's the only thing they can feel. They made the mistake of thinking contained meant harmless, but a cage doesn't make the beast disappear. It just makes the first step out inevitable. And every second they kept me there, they were winding the spring tighter. So when it finally snapped, they didn't hear it, they didn't see it, they only felt it. Too late to move, too late to ask why. All they could do was stand there and realize the door had always been open. They kept circling me with their words, little jabs dressed as jokes, questions they thought were clever. It was all noise, the kind that people make when they're afraid of silence. I let it hang between us anyway, let it crawl over their skin until they started feeling it more than hearing themselves. Some of them laughed, but it was nervous, too sharp at the edges, too quick to fade. They didn't notice their shoulders inching higher, their hands fidgeting with whatever was in reach. I noticed. I notice everything. I didn't flinch, didn't bite, didn't give them what they came for. That's the thing they never understand. The real strike doesn't need a wind-up. It needs patience. You hold it. You let it grow. You let them feed it without realizing they're doing it. Every question they asked, I answered with a stare. Every insult they tried to sneak in, I buried under silence so heavy it made their own words sound ridiculous. They wanted to pull me out into their game. Instead, I pulled them deeper into mine. By the time they realized they'd stopped smiling, stopped talking, stopped moving, they were already caught. Not by chains, not by force, by the simple fact that I never moved at all. It started with one of them leaving the table early. No excuse, no explanation, just a sudden decision to stand and walk away. The others noticed, but no one said it out loud. They just filled the empty chair with more words, hoping to patch the silence that had started leaking into the room. But silence doesn't patch, it spreads, it seeps into cracks they didn't even know were there. I watched them try to carry on, watched the laughter shrink, watched their eyes flick toward me when they thought I wasn't looking. Each glance was a question they didn't want answered. The more they spoke, the more their voices betrayed them. Breath catching between sentences, tone dropping lower without meaning to, a hesitation before the punchline, like they were checking if it was worth it. Spoiler, it wasn't. One by one, they stopped trying to make eye contact. One by one, their sentences cut shorter. I didn't have to tell them to quiet down. They did it themselves. That's the thing about real control. It doesn't ask, it takes. By the time the second one left, no one pretended it was normal anymore. They just sat there, waiting for something to happen, not realizing it already had. The air was heavier now. You could almost hear it pressing on their chests, making each breath a little shallower. No one wanted to be the first to break the silence, but no one wanted to sit in it either. That's the sweet spot, the moment when discomfort turns into fear. A fork scraped against a plate, too loud. Someone shifted in their seat, the sound of fabric pulling tight, cutting through the stillness like a blade. No one laughed this time. They just glanced at each other, looking for a signal, for a leader. But leaders don't survive here, not when I'm in the room. I leaned back, slow enough for them to notice, deliberate enough for them to understand it wasn't a stretch. It was a statement, the kind you don't say out loud because words would ruin it. I wasn't threatening, I was reminding. Every minute dragged like an hour. The ones who were still holding on, trying to act casual, were the ones sweating the most. You could see the thoughts bouncing in their heads. Why isn't he saying anything? What is he thinking? When will he move? And the answer was simple. I wasn't going to. I'd already done enough. The rest, they'd do to themselves. They always think the shift will be loud, that when someone turns into something else, you'll hear it. A snap, a scream, a crash. But it doesn't happen like that. It's quieter, more final, more certain. I felt it in my hands first, not shaking, not clenched, just steady, too steady. My mind had stopped running circles. The weight of their stares didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt irrelevant. They weren't holding me in this room. I was holding them, and I could let go whenever I wanted. The funny thing about power is that if you have to announce it, you don't have it. I didn't need to prove anything, didn't need to raise my voice or take a step forward. My stillness had already rewritten the rules. They'd stopped looking at each other for answers. They were looking at me. That's when I knew. The door wasn't just open. I wasn't even in the cage anymore. I was the one locking them in. And if I stayed, it wasn't because I couldn't leave. It was because I wanted to watch them feel it. Subscribe, not for me, not for them. For the moment you realize you weren't set free, you freed yourself, thought the worst had passed, that the tension had peaked and would fade if they just waited it out. But they didn't understand. I wasn't releasing anything. I was settling into it. When you stop carrying their weight, you start noticing how light you really are. I could see their movements in slow detail, the twitch of a jaw, the restless fingers, the way someone's eyes darted to the door like they were measuring the distance. I didn't chase them with words, I trapped them with stillness. There's a rhythm to control. You press just enough, then hold, then press again. And right now the hold was killing them. They were used to people breaking first, to someone filling the space so they wouldn't have to sit in it. I wasn't going to give them that comfort. Every breath they took was a little sharper now. Every glance they stole at me was longer, like they were trying to read something that wasn't written on my face. They were starting to realize there was nothing to read, because the story wasn't about them anymore. I had become the room. And you can't escape the room when it decides to keep you. It's strange how quickly a place can turn unfamiliar. Same walls, same chairs, same faces. But once the air changes, nothing feels safe anymore. They were shifting in their seats like the floor itself had tilted, like they were sliding toward something they couldn't see but could feel. I didn't follow them with my eyes. I didn't need to. When you know you're the center of gravity, you don't have to move. Everything else moves for you. I heard the soft tap of a foot under the table, the muffled swallow of someone trying to clear a dry throat. Those tiny sounds were cracks, and once you notice cracks, you can't stop looking for them. Silence isn't empty, it's loaded. Every second it stays, it gathers more weight, more pressure, more inevitability. They were speaking less now, not because they had nothing to say, but because they were afraid of what might come back to them if they did. I sat there, letting them dig their own holes deeper with every twitch, every half-finished sentence. I wasn't their enemy, I was their mirror, and the longer they looked, the less they liked what they saw. By the time anyone dared to stand, they weren't leaving the table, they were escaping it. By now, the silence had teeth. It wasn't just absence of sound. It was a living thing, crawling over their skin, sinking in deeper with every moment they stayed. You could see it in their posture. Shoulders folding in, hands retreating into laps, eyes avoiding mine as if eye contact would burn. One tried to speak, just one. The words came out too fast, too thin, like they were trying to outrun something. But once they realized no one was following, the sentence died halfway, leaving the taste of failure in the air. That's the problem with breaking the quiet. You better have something worth the noise. They didn't. I didn't laugh. I didn't even smirk. I just tilted my head slightly, letting the weight of the pause fall back into place. That small shift was all it took for the others to glance at each other in quiet panic, silently begging for someone to save them from a situation they created. The truth was sinking in. I wasn't the one trapped in here with them. They were trapped here with me. And the longer they stayed, the more they'd wish they'd left while they still could. And so I gave them nothing, no words, no release. Just the cold understanding that this was never about the room. It was about me deciding when it ends. They didn't notice when it stopped being a room. 4 walls, a table, a few chairs, those were just props now. The real space was mine, shaped by the weight I'd poured into it. Every movement they made was cautious, like the air had turned into glass and one wrong shift would shatter it. No one met my eyes anymore, not because they didn't want to, but because they couldn't. Staring at me too long was like standing on the edge of a drop. You could feel something pulling you in, and you weren't sure you'd come back. That's what happens when presence turns into a weapon. A cough from the far end of the table was the loudest sound in minutes, and it landed like an explosion. The others flinched, as if that tiny break in the stillness had made everything worse. And maybe it had, because I didn't react. I just let it hang there, a reminder that they were guests in something I owned. Even when someone stood, pushing their chair back too quickly, they didn't really leave. Their body walked out, but their mind stayed here, replaying the moments, wondering when exactly they lost control. That's the part they'll remember. Not what I did, not what I said, but what I didn't, and how it still destroyed them. They'll tell the story wrong. They always do. They'll say I was quiet because I had nothing to add, that I let things play out because I didn't care. They'll convince themselves I was just there, and they'll never realize that being there was the whole point. Power doesn't always slam the door. Sometimes it just stands in the doorway and waits for you to walk into it. That's what broke them. Not my words, not my actions, but the realization that I was holding the outcome the entire time. And I never even had to lift a hand. By the time they left, they weren't sure if they'd been dismissed or if they'd fled. That's the beauty of it. You don't need to chase someone when you make the place itself unbearable for them. They walk away carrying the weight with them, and it doesn't fade. It lingers. They read the room once. I erased it, and now no matter where they go, they'll wonder if the walls are still mine. Subscribe, not for the noise, for the silence you'll own one day, and the way it will own them.